right, welcome back to Be a Shower Tuesday. This is the launch segment where we speak to experts in terms or in matters to do with finances. And today we're discussing matters to do with, implications of the Supreme Court verdict on business and investment in Kenya. And on set, we're joined by James Mumo, who is an experienced banker who deals in credit management and currently works as a relationship manager. Also, we have is also an entrepreneur, so that's very interesting because I love having entrepreneurs on set. They just they have this global outlook of things. I love that. All right. Then we have Patrick Okinda, who is the vice president of the Financial Society of Kenyatta University and also a participant in the Global Management Challenge 2017-2018. As I told you earlier, your parents must be very proud of you. You know, I never participated in anything global when I was as young as you. You follow me? Yeah. So, big up to the parents of Kinda. All right. Anyway, guys, welcome to this.
Thank you.
Amazing. So today we're discussing matters to do with the Supreme Court, verdict. First of all, let's just backtrack. The previous sitting that we had, the nullification of the presidential election, the election of Uhuru Kenyatta back then for the August 8th, and they ordered for re-election. What did that do to the business world, Mr. Momo?
Thank you for having me. I think one of the things that we have seen, especially in the last two elections, is that every time there's an election year, you have business going down. So as we were in June and July, you could see that businesses were now hoarding their services and their goods in anticipation for the election because you're not sure whether there will be violence. Then once it was nullified again, it extended that period of uncertainty. So I think now when people realize that there's going to be another election, now the amount of tension for especially small business owners is what's going to happen now between now and October 26th. What is going to happen on October 26th? Will there be another nullification? So there's a lot of uncertainty that people had because anytime we have made it that anytime we have elections, people are anticipating that there'll be looting, there'll be violence, there'll be killings that will be going on. So business people tend to hold the little money they have instead of using it during that time. So I think now with the verdict that happened yesterday, it helps to now, can we now stop having tension and let's now move on. Yeah.
And that's where we are heading with this conversation. But even before that, Patrick, there's the aspect of, there are those of us who are in school. First of all, the August 8th election, a lot of people had to travel to go home. And after that, things, the way we saw, the way the politics were being played in the country, even some people are not able to travel back. So you call somebody is like, no, me, Nico home. And they won't be able to come back. Tell me, previously in the, after the nullification of the August 8th election, what impact did that have to, especially, the student world? Because these you can relate even more as a student. What impact did that have to?
Okay, mostly as students, being an example, we have a lot of reliance on the systems that have already been put, maybe the institutional timetables, and maybe the arrangements that have been made for us, we've not made them for ourselves. And mostly you find institutions who are affected by the verdict. And so the students were just responding to what they're being asked to do. Come back to school, they come. Stay at home, they stay at home. So it makes them not to have a programmed schedule ahead. They have to think with someone else who is not sure about the future. Like if I can remember, we were given a holiday home, and then students were called back to school. A few came immediately, and a huge number came later. You see, people were not sure if indeed we are being called, or we are just being asked to risk our lives back to school. Yes.
So there's, we cannot avoid one thing. When there is election, it touches every sector of our lives somehow. in some way, in some little way. And now we are back to, again, we had two cases, petitions at the Supreme Court, and of course by an unanimous decision, the bench decided to uphold the election of President Uhuru Kenyatta on the October 26th election. And first of all, it was noted that at the stock markets, our shilling was becoming stronger, and more people, it was growing stronger. Tell me about that. Why this?
I think most of our investors are reactionary, and it's more of what does the market say, so what will I do? It should actually be the other way around. For very many of our investors, especially our retail investors, they look at what does the news say, so then what should we do? If we see a politician has said this, then what should we do about our investment? In actual sense, if you want to be an investor in the stock exchange, you do not look at one day to determine whether or not you will invest in a particular stock. You need to look at the life of that particular stock. You need to look at the company. Does it have good management? Does it have good profits? Does it have good prospects for the future? Does it have a 5-10-year plan that they have for the company on how to grow it? What are the trajectories that they have for profit? Those are supposed to be what we should use to determine whether or not we will invest in a particular company. But the Kenyan market, the bulk of the people who make, especially the smaller sales, look at what does a particular politician say about what we should do with a given company. There is even an economic boycott that has been suggested by one of the politicians, so that now affects their decisions on the stock exchange. The impact of it is small in individual terms, but again, you can see that it may have an effect in the long term. Yes.
So, it was a good thing when somebody says the shilling has become stronger, against the dollar, because there's a probability of things becoming more stable. Now the end of the politicking period has come to an end. It is a good thing, but again, Patrick, let's look at these other aspects, that these other winds that are hitting our government at large, because for example, right now a lot of students are not in school, right? And that is attributed to the fact that there ain't much learning going on because of lecturer strike. Tell me about this. What do you think? Where are we doing something wrong, or people normally take advantage? For example, lecturers, they know it's an electioneering period. There's some sort of expenditure when it comes to running an election. At the same time, they come up and demand their CBA be implemented, their rise, of their salaries and whatnot be implemented. Do you feel that they're taking advantage of the situation, or they're justified to ask for their
it will be difficult to determine if actually they're taking advantage of the situation. But what I know, when it comes to the effect side, that the effect is not so much significant, especially if you look at it from the stock market point of view. Recently, I was looking at releases by Nabo Capital. Nabo Capital is a branch of Centum that investigates stock performance, all those kind of things. Maybe to start from after August 8th, the whole market was red, meaning business was going down. And then a few weeks later, when we are approaching August 26th, it was almost red, but at least it's improving. And after the 26th, after August 26th, we had Kenyan markets performing better than most markets in Africa. We were even ahead of countries like Tanzania, where there's at least political stability. I don't want to use the word uncertain, because we also have some competition between Chama cha Mapinduzi and the Chadema party. When you come back to Kenya, you find that all the strikes and the boycotts and all these kind of things has done is just to make people have that wait and see attitude. What will happen next? But the economy at least is bouncing back. Much as we are not there, a few major industries have been affected, like the tourism industry and a few other industries, transport industry. But when you look it from an overview, a bigger picture, you find that the strikes mostly, they don't have such a huge implication on politics and business. It has an impact in the institutional programs. Yes.
So politics and business are not so much impact on that. But
The strikes, maybe mostly the strikes.
mostly the strike.
Yeah, especially lecturer strike.
Because I do believe, actually, there's a proposal that was tabled, was it in Parliament or whatnot, in regards to fees being raised for regular students, job students. It's been standard for a very long time, and they're saying a cost of running universities. It's growing, so these guys have to have. There is a probability of 30% increase in fees next year. Now, with that, it brings me to the question, Mumo, about now we know that Uhuru Kenyatta is going to be sworn into office in a few days, I think a week or so. And with that, still, are we certain? You've spoken about, it's not a, with economics, it's not a matter of days. You checking at a particular day. It's a long term, doing, some longevity and, extrapolations. But tell me, with this aspect of now we are getting a president, and basically it means that politics no more, it's back to business. Do you think things are gonna get better for Kenya as a country?
As a country, I feel like we are resilient, and businesses have a way of bouncing back. In 2003, we were voted the most optimistic people, so I will still remain to be optimistic.
Yes.
I think on an economic outlook, whatever the opposition says still has an effect on the economy. They told people to boycott particular products. So I think for me it would be interesting to look at those products in 3-6 months, in a year, and see the effect of that. I think the momentum for them needs to be maintained for them to get their message across. But on the side of the president and him being sworn in, he has a very big task. Number one, the voter turnout was not as impressive as August 8th. The numbers are still in debate. It depends with where you look at it.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, he needs to be a uniting figure, because at this moment he is not. So what is he going to do to make sure that all Kenyans rally behind him? Because he has 50% of the people saying he's validly elected, and the other 50% saying that he's not validly elected. So as a leader, he's at a point where he needs to be like Solomon. So what wise thing is he going to do? Because this is his legacy that is in question. And he needs to make wise decisions in order to make sure that there are no more killings, that people stop feeling disenfranchised in the country, and that resources that are from the national government seem to be distributed equally. Because that's one of the things that the opposition is using as their arsenal, and saying the government is not giving us this, the government is not giving us this, which are rights for every single individual, and he must not seem like he's favoring one child and leaving the others to starve. He has to look like an impartial leader, because the courts have said that he is validly elected, which I have a problem with. The cases themselves, they were haphazard compared to the ones that were done in August. And they lacked merit in the view of the Supreme Court. And now that he is going to be sworn in on 28th, he needs to work seriously on making sure that his MPs in Parliament do not seem like they are bossing everyone around. They need to come down, speak with people, even if they seem to have all the numbers. We need to have everyone on the table feeling like we are in this together. Yes.
And in fact, it brings me matters elections, because this has always been a pertinent issue across across the years, over the years. I mean, electioneering period is an issue, is a big issue. And there's a new system in government in the campus elections that have been introduced. I believe higher education has so much to offer for a nation. That's why it's called university. We come from different corners of the world and we meet here, and you know, we brainstorm. It's universal, right? It should be a source of ideas and whatnot. So tell me, there's this new system, I'm told, that has been introduced where it's a delegate system. Yes, where you know, the students vote for school delegate, then these delegates vote for now the council, the chair and his team. Are you familiar with that system?
I am familiar.
Do you think that system is gonna empower students, or is it good, or what are your opinions about that?
My opinion is very humble. I don't want to say whether it's good or bad, but I can say the reason why it was introduced is because initially we had a lot of rioting whenever we had an election in any campus in Kenya, mostly University of Nairobi, which had a huge strike sometime last year. And when it was introduced, I think the person who presented the bill in the parliament thought that this is a hybrid system that will make students to be involved in coming up with delegates and then be represented in coming up with the president and the governing council. It's called the governing council. I don't want to imagine such a thing will be introduced in a nation like Kenya, because they thought in the university it will reduce the strikes, the kind of temperature that is always there whenever we have an election. In Kenya we have the same temperatures. Anytime we want to vote for president, people are so much optimistic, as he says, and people are expecting a lot. People are expecting change. People are expecting a new leadership, and people do anything to make sure they are in the corridors of power. Unfortunately, at the university, students are still resistant to this new system. Maybe if it's implemented in our country to reduce the kind of competition that is there, I don't know the effects it will have on democracy, on the will of the people, but I think it won't be easily welcomed. People sometimes want to participate in coming up with their own leadership. They don't want to be represented. And then also, when you look at a business perspective, hopefully it will reduce the uncertainties that are there whenever we have an election. That an investor will want to invest into a certain future, will want to reduce the level of risk. When you bring such a system in the nation, that we have our MPs and a few members who are representing a given group of people acting as our delegates to come up with the next government, it will still be uncertain with us that we have put our faith of leadership in people who are going to represent us. They might have different opinions from us. So maybe they will go there and be biased to themselves and not to us as a nation.
I wanted to pick your brain on that particular issue because it's been a source of concern and very much discussion about that. But coming back to you, Mumo, matters to do with it's a concern. Matters to do with our debts as a country. Everyone is like, even during the times of campaigns, it was like one of the opinions or shepherds in terms of the opposition were like, the government is taking too much money, but you're not seeing the fruit of this money and whatnot. What do you have to say? What can we do as a country to avoid? Because there are some projections where people are saying, if we continue this way, our debts right now, they are over 50% of our GDP. It is a huge concern. So if we continue this way, it will be bad. What do you have? What solutions do we have for this?
I think the first thing is we need to stop borrowing fast, because whatever we have borrowed is too much. We borrowed in 2014, we did the Eurobond to pay up another debt. And now, 2 or so weeks ago, the CS of Finance came out and said, we are broke. So if he says we are broke as a country, what does that mean? It means that there's a debt that we are supposed to pay in a few months, we are still unable to pay it. And once the debt that we borrowed from the Chinese for the SGR becomes due, which is another huge amount, will we be able to pay it if we cannot be able to pay the small amounts now? One of the issues that is there, especially with the kind of borrowing that we are doing single sourcing borrowing, where like we borrowed from the Chinese, but we have to pick a Chinese company to do the railway. We have done another borrowing that was done just before the elections to do a dual carriage way from Nairobi to Mombasa that we've done with the US, and an American firm has to build the road. So we are taking money, borrowing money from someone, and then once we borrowed from them, we give to them again to use. So it beats the purpose of how money is supposed to come into the economy to help the economy. So number one, I'd say let's first interrogate why we borrow. Because we should be borrowing in order to put it somewhere where it will actually give us a return. The SGR as it is cannot be able to pay for itself. That's the biggest problem that I have with the project itself. Because even if it ran for 24 hours as it is, and the amount of money that we put into it, the 327 billion, it will not be able to pay for itself. Tanzania is doing a railway that will be electric, that is less than what we are spending. The international standard for how much should be spent, we spent 3 times more. So such statistics in my head just make me mad, because where did all that money go to? Then we are being told by the same CS of Finance that in the next 4 years we'll spend another 45 billion to make the diesel engine that is there right now to become electric. So my question is, why didn't we do electric in the first place and actually have a solar farm that is probably in Kibwezi or Mtitoande where there is less people, and have a solar farm and say all the energy that's from that place goes to just powering the SGR and nowhere else? Because his argument in that case why we now need to do the 45 billion is because we currently do not have enough power. We have about 700 megawatts and the SGR needs 1,000. So why not do 1,000 megawatt solar plant in the initial phase when they were buying land, and then that is just used to power the SGR. So I think our country is borrowing just for the sake of it. And you can even see the ratings that we are getting from institutions like Moody's. We are continuously being downgraded. And once we default on one loan, then we get downgraded again. And downgrading means that the interest rate that we are being charged for a particular loan will always go up. So it's getting more and more expensive for us.
Wow.
Yes.
So we need to stop.
Yes. Let's just stop,
evaluate,
and then just look at what have we done so far. So how can we make sure that people are actually making use of the resources that we've already put into the economy before we borrow again? Yes.
Wow. Cool. Interesting discussion. We can speak about these things for days. I normally tell people when it comes to Kenya, you know, when you go back to the village, napata wazee wamekaa, they speak for hours, you know, because, you know, our country has so much to speak about. But for the moment, time is not on our side. So I really appreciate you guys for coming through and airing your views and your wisdom, sharing with our viewers. We really appreciate that.
Sure.
Right. God bless you. Right.
Thank you so much.
There's the discussion. You've heard it by yourself. Matters to do with borrowing, the way this particular Supreme Court ruling is going to be affecting the economy at large and many more. So basically, mine is to encourage you as an individual. Watching this, I can say it's not enough. Let me just boldly confess, it's not enough, man. You need to sit down by yourself, all right? You need to sit down by yourself and even dig in. Because sometimes you might be living in a huge problem, but you have no idea. Yours is just maybe to complain, oh, why is my life this way? But you have no real understanding of what's happening. So dig deep. Dig deep, read about your country, know what's going on, man. And also air your views, all right? Go on Twitter. As much as you go on Twitter on bashing somebody, go on Twitter and start an economic discussion about that. I believe it starts from dialogue, and from there we can shape policies. You never know. All right. So with that, we take a short break right here at Bishop Tuesday. Shall be back with more.